What is up, MFers? Today's video is going to help so many of you guys during this time of the year, and that is, of course, the spawn phase. Unless you're in the bottom, 10% of the country where it's already happening or happened, or you're way up north when it hasn't happened yet. I mean, this video is going to help so many people catch fish around the spawn. But I'm not just talking about, when you get a nice warming trend, all them fish just slid up there, everything's perfect, and you just go whack a big bag up on bed like it's super easy, like everyone wants you to believe in the comment section, right? No, that's how it happens about 1% of the time. The rest of the time, you either got 40,000-mile-an-hour winds, the water came up 3 feet, the temperature dropped 47 degrees overnight. Conditions are almost never perfect, and there is so much change happening during the spawn phase that you got to make major adjustments, and you got to make them quick because those fish are adjusting super quick as well. Today's video, I'm going to tell you all of my sneaks, all of my surefire bets, and what to look for if you are fishing around the spawn. It's gonna be a good one, guys. Let's go. Before we start talking about some of the crazy water events that could happen, whether that be a high water event, sometimes a low water event, but usually, you're getting spring rains, so the water's gonna be coming up, the water's gonna be getting muddy, or a cold front. Again, constantly happening in the spring. Constant, you get a nice warming trend, things start looking up. Oh, I'm gonna go out on Saturday because it's gonna be warmed up and the water's gonna be good and they should be starting to get up on bed. And then boom, you got a freaking cold front the day before. Before we talk about that, let's go into my most safe sneaks or ways to catch fish during the spawn period. First off, we need to talk about where these sumbitches want to be. Of course, you got the people that think you can just use a live scope to go out in the middle of the lake. You don't need to know shit about bass fishing. You just go out to the middle and you sling a minnow around and you load the boat and win every tournament. And if you're over the age of 23, then it's impossible for you to compete. You got those people. So let's take out the completely mindless people that don't know anything about actual fishing out of this equation and talk about what is actually going to be happening. And that is, these fish are thinking differently than all the rest of the time of the year. These fish want to be around spawning substrate. And of course, that is very simple. That is very basic. Everybody knows that, but it's something that we can forget. We can look at a big map of a giant body of water and say, oh, I've caught fish in that creek before. Ooh, they get up there in the post spawn. They like to group up on that point. Oh, there's a rock pile in the middle of this creek. Oh, there's good cedar trees on this creek over here. You need to make things a lot more simple than that. All you need to look for, I don't know if I want to even tell people this, but we're going to freaking go into it because hopefully Elite Series guys aren't watching this and people I compete against. But what I look for when I go to a body of water during the pre-spawn phase, whether that even be 40-degree water or 45-degree water, all the way up until the water is in the spawn phase, which water temperatures and everything, we'll get into that too. But when the temperature is, 60 to 75 degrees, anytime in there you can have fish really, wanting to be on bed and do their thing. But I'm looking for areas that are protected from a north wind and a south wind, especially a north wind, but also a south wind too, because places that are protected are places that are not going to get blown out during major water events, whether that be the water event of 4-foot waves crashing in, stirring up the bed. The bass needs sun. They need sun on the eggs to make them germinate, which means, the cleaner the water is, the deeper they can bed in theory. The muddier the water is, the shallower they're going to want to bed, so that same photo light period can get to those eggs. But when I'm looking at an area, the most ideal spot that I can find is if you have a creek, especially a smaller one if you want to make things simple, where it kind of, there's the main lake, you got a cove off the side, and then in that cove you have one big on the north side, you have one creek right here on the north side of that guy right there that comes off the main lake. Yahtzee, that is freaking money because that's protected from a north wind. And this lake's, north, south down here. Guess what way the sun's gonna be blasting? It's gonna stay on the south side. It's gonna be doing this all day long. It's not gonna be coming straight across yet because it's spring. It's gonna be down here. So them sun rays are gonna be hitting this north bank, this south facing, people call them north facing banks, really they face south. But the sun's gonna be hitting those areas and warming them the fastest, especially the ones with some flatness to them. If they got a creek channel, man, I mean, that's the other thing I look for. If you look on a map and it's just a shallow bowl, not much happening with contours, they can spawn in there. But if you have a creek channel where they can follow that path, I mean, the most perfect spots that I've found in some of these tournaments I've done well in, you got that north pocket. It's got a little wiggly creek channel that kind of squiggles its way back there on your little Navionics map or your Lake Master map you're looking at. And then it's got flats, boom, boom, flats off the side, flats in the back. Perfect, perfect location. You start thinking about the spawn phase, and I think guys think too much. I got to get to the back. I got to go to the back. I got to go to the shallowest, flattest, muddiest water because that's where they spawn. Well, go to Toledo Bend. I mean, start looking around there. Some of these creeks are 6-7 miles long off the main lake. They don't need to go back there. They might live on the main lake. I mean, I think 75% of fish in most of these giant reservoirs live on the main lake all year round. They got no reason to freaking go to the back. They don't want to swim 7 miles. Why not just go to the first creek right there that's got spawning substrate? A lot of people, same thing. You look at a marina, another great place for a fish to spawn. Perennial place for tournaments to get won is around marinas, and they really will live in marinas all year round because marinas, you know, they have floating habitat. They're deep because they harbor big boats, but they all have break walls for the most part, and a lot of times those are riprap break walls. Don't freaking go past this break wall here in the marina, this riprap break wall, and go all the way past the boats, big everything, go all the way to the back of it. Them sumbitch fish don't need to go back there. They need protection. All they're gonna do, they're gonna swim right in, whatever corridor, they're gonna go down the main bank and come up to this jetty right here. They're gonna turn right and they're gonna go dot, 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 beds down the side of it right there. They just need a little bit of protection. So I find the first protected areas from a north and south wind, especially a north wind, off of the main lake. And it really, really helps to have deep water access, whether that be a deep marina or a creek channel, a windy little creek channel going through it. Fish will get in the back of stuff. Fish will get in the flats. Fish will get it up in the mud as shallow as they can get. But what I found is, you know, you don't need to spend a ton of time daubing around back there as shallow as you can possibly get under normal water level conditions. You don't need to go all the way back there. They will stop on the very first place that they can spawn. They're lazy like people are. They don't need to freaking go all the way to the back. They can stop right there as soon as they get the protection that they need, and they know where those areas are. Whew. So let's talk one more thing before we start getting into baits, and spawning substrate. So this can mean several different things depending on the body of water you're on. I don't like to give absolutes. There's no absolutes or truths in fishing, and that's the same for, you know, every body of water is a little bit different. But here's what they like and here's what they want to spawn on. Most importantly, hard bottom, hard cover. We were just at a place, Ray Roberts for the Classic, and we already knew it was going to fish small. It didn't help that the wind blew 300 the entire time. But one thing that was different about the pockets where it went down in like 3 different areas for the most part. Those areas had a couple different things that were absolutely crucial. They had harder bottom, they had good grass, they had standing timber, but they didn't have soft bottom in any of them. The entire lake had standing timber. A lot of places had grass that they were still staged in, but the fish that the best possible areas had all 3. They had hard bottom, they had a sandier, harder bottom. Sandier bottom places, you know, a lot of times it's going to be cleaner water because the wind's not going to stir it up quite as much, which again, I think the bass would prefer to be in cleaner water during the spawn, so that's an attractive factor. They had timber, so they could stage up and stop and sit on that timber, which the god dang they freaking did. They came up and ate this provoked jerkbait in that timber, real nice and sexy like when they were staged up after that cold front. And they had the grass, so they could stage in that, and you could be like freaking Timmy Lee Livesey and get your baits hung up in each other in your giant bait pile of too many baits. No, you could sling a stupid freaking pink chatterbait around in that milfoil and be sneaky and not tell me about it until day 2 and give me one of these. But then by the time he gave me one of those, he's freaking caught every damn fish in the entire lake on it, and so I couldn't catch any on it. Anyways, what I'm saying is spawning substrate's important to know. If you're in a highland reservoir, you have no grass, you have no standing timber, the entire lake is rock. Bass can, especially spotted bass, they can spawn on some of that flatter bluff type rock, but really what you're gonna wanna look for is that finer gravel sand. Again, same areas, protected little coves, little flat creeks that are out of that north wind, the first areas they can slide on into. And that's why highland reservoirs are very, very patternable, because they have a lot of the same going on. You know, it's a bluffier main lake area, bluffs and rocks and long points, turns into more chunk rock, channel swing bank, stuff like that. And then that turns into more pea gravel points, into pea gravel pockets and stuff there. And again, do not forget, if you go to Lake of the Ozarks, you go to any of these places, You don't got to go to the back. No need to go all the way to the back. Find areas that are the first stopping grounds, find areas that have deep water access nearby. If that bottom substrate's right, they will be able to spawn in those areas. One other type of substrate that's very important, we've talked about highland areas with rock. We've talked about, places with a lot of standing timber and a little bit of grass and some sandy bottom. A lot of places don't have any sandy bottom. They don't have any rock with pea gravel or sand again, and they don't have the grass that they can pull up on the bank, and really they're not going to spawn on the grass, but they're going to find holes, and a lot of the grass grows in harder bottom areas. There's not much grass that doesn't grow in hard bottom areas. So what do you do in those situations? Two other places that are kind of similar to what I'm looking at right back here in the Pasquotank Sound, even though we do have, sandy bottom, but a lot of places have cypress trees, stumps, or lily pads if they don't have the other two types of substrate. Fish will spawn right on cypress tree knees, no problem. That's a very obvious thing. But they'll also spawn on lily pad stems. Pad stems are very important even in the spring, even when they're dead, even when it's just the stem is just sticking up and the top's died off and it's not even on anymore. Hard bottom areas that the fish can stage in and spawn on. Very, very effective areas to fish. If you're in a mud bottom area, a lake that just doesn't get clean or it stays dirty all year, cypress trees and lily pad stems. And we're going to talk about a little bit more about the ones to look for. But let's go into what I'm going to be throwing in all these different scenarios. The baits, the presentations that are important to know. Ideal conditions, we're pre-spawn, we're spawn, and we'll kind of get, post-spawn's not really that important to us right now, but pre-spawn and spawn, we don't have rising water, we don't have falling water, we don't have muddying water, we don't have clean water, clearing water, which is pretty much the deal in the spring. Usually you're not going to have clearing or dropping water, 95% of the time at least. So in that situation, obviously you're going to want to cover water. I have one lake in Texas that I can do this, where I can sit in the damn driver's seat, I can idle, 50 yards from the bank, and I can be like, that's a bed. That's a bed, because the water's, it's 7-foot visibility, and it's freaking hydrilla around the edge with big old bald spots in the middle where them bass sit. That almost never happens. So for the most part, you're not going to see beds from a distance, from a long ways away. And some of these bodies of water, a lot of them everyone fishes are so big that you can't just go put her on the bank and go on high down the bank. You're gonna have to actually fish for these fish to get an idea. So my all-time favorite bait, if you got 1.5 to 5 foot visibility, is going to be covering water with a swim bait. This is a 6-inch whale swim bait, and I love this thing during this pre-spawn and spawn phase. It's a big meal for the fish to come up. They like to eat it, of course, all times of the year, but during the spawn, it might be something where the fish doesn't even get the bait, but they're gonna come up and you'll feel a nip on the back of it, you'll feel a pop. You gotta know what your bait's doing at all times and really be in tune with your bait, because this thing might be just sashaying its way along next to a stump or a grass clump or something, and you'll just feel that, boom. And you're like, I don't think that was the tree, I think that was something. I've had so many times where I'm like, you know what? Frickin' put that down. I think I had a bite right there. Take out this frickin' clout, and it frickin' swims off, bud. And it's a big one, because those big bass, they aren't up there to eat. A lot of times when they're on bed, they're just trying to run it off. You've seen bass chase bluegill off beds. You're just gonna feel that little, it's just gonna stop your tail or just nip your tail a lot of times. I'd love if they came up and frickin' goosh, got it, but that's not what they're up there to do. That's another thing you need to think about, We're not fishing for fish that are up there trying to eat. We're fishing for fish that are annoyed. They wanna move something away and get down to their damn business so they can focus on what they're trying to do, which is, I don't mean to be too sentimental and tree hugger here, but a really incredible process of their life where they're not for once thinking about eating food. They're trying to somehow trick a female bass into coming to their bed that they've created, and then those females are there not to eat either. So you gotta think about that. You gotta be really insightful about what you're doing, and this is more important this time of year really than any. So I love to cover water with this guy right here. if I'm in those perfect conditions, it doesn't matter. Any of those 3 different types of lakes, this 6-inch whale is deadly. I fish it on this like 7/0 or 8/0 hook. It doesn't come with a weight. You can fish it on a weight. I like to just put some wire on there, enough to just keel it and keep it straight in the column. Just, you know, slow wind it a foot below the surface and let them come up and freaking peck it, or they will, of course, crush it sometimes too. But great bait to throw in that pre-spawn phase. If you got lower light conditions, you got a little bit of wind, a little bit of chop, or a little bit of rain even, it's really hard to beat this guy in the pre-spawn into the spawn phase. It's one that gets forgotten. I think it's thought of as more of a summer lure around, you know, of course it's a low light presentation. Buzz baits are so much better low light, it seems like, because it's the dumbest looking bait of all time. I remember my Uncle Mark, rest in peace, when I was like 8 years old, I was rolling around the campground and I had just got done fishing, and I had been, of course I had like a Zebco 33, and it was probably a buzzbait that wasn't even this big, but it looked, I mean, I was throwing it on a 5.5 foot rod, and he's like, "What are you trying to catch with that, sharks?" And he didn't fish or nothing. He didn't know anything about it, but I don't know why I just thought about that. But what a stupid looking bait that is so deadly effective. It will be effective in 50, 100 years if we don't have a nuclear holocaust. And that people have always caught fish on this buzz bait. I like to throw stroker craw or this Congo craw on the back of it. I like that flat surface. Most guys, if not, you know, a lot of guys have started taking the skirts off. That gives a couple different reasons for that. I do still love skirted baits, and they still catch fish just as good as they always have. But it seems like, you know, with a little bit of kick and action on the back, it gives the fish something to come in, and it gives more action. They can get it. Feels more natural in their mouth unless they're eating a freaking metal blade. And the flatness of it gives it skippability, so you can skip it up under docks. I'm not talking about, but it will just enough that it's going to skip, you know, 1 or 2 times, get you up behind that spot. Boom, they can eat under that dock or that lay down. Buzzbait's very effective during this time of the year. We're still talking about perfect situations, perfect scenarios, and this is something that is just like, duh, obvious. Everyone throws this. Everyone knows about a wacky rigged stick bait, but man, this green pumpkin juice color stick bait, I thought I was gonna freaking win the damn classic on this thing. I'm not gonna lie. And they just got off of it for whatever reason. I think because of the cold front. But get in any damn area where you think a fish might spawn or might have a possible spawning substrate. I don't care if you're looking at them on your screen, not on your screen. You can catch them in the freaking middle of the water column on live scope with this thing if you want to once in a while. But just throwing this thing up around some of those areas where, you know, a standing timber on a grass line on the way back to a spawning pocket, perfect. You can throw this thing just on flats where they get back and they spawn. You're just like, you know, I've been to this area before. I know there's spawning bass on the inside of this riprap jetty on this marina. Throw this thing out, let it sit, just pop it a few times, let it sit, fish it nice and slow. It's almost the most, I would say this is the most effective bait around the spawn. Look at John Cox. I mean, he'll throw this thing year round, but he is deadly around the spawn time. Up shallow, less than 3 feet of water with this bait right here. You know, I don't do anything too crazy with it. I will fish it if I'm around a lot of grass. In the classic, for instance, I was doing this. I will fish it on a Texas rig too. 4/0 Texas rig. I'll fish it on big line, you know, 16, 20 pound fluorocarbon line. But generally, you know, I get so many bites fishing it on a weedless, wacky setup, braid to fluorocarbon leader. This is a 6 cents, 611 medium. I caught some fish on this the other day, fishing for, I think they were actually males down in Texas that were garden beds still. But man, around the spawn, pre-spawn, post-spawn, spawn, it's almost impossible to beat a wacky rig unless you're trying to cover a lot of water. This is the one where you know where they're at. You have a good idea where they're at. It's really tough to beat this guy right here. Another thing is, like I said, if you have a buzz bait, they come up and swirl on it. They just pop it. That swim bait, that 6 cents whale, they come up and nip the tail on it. They don't get it. Do not throw the buzz bait back in there. Do not throw the swim bait back in there. They'll probably do, at very most, they'll do the same thing, if not get more weary of it. Throw this guy in there, and I'm not even gonna say you're gonna catch 50% of them. You probably catch like 80% of them if you're throwing this guy back in there. They just they eat it. And really, you know, you get them on bed a lot of times, and you wanna flip in like your sneaky little creature bait, your lizard, your craw, your beaver, your tube, whatever it might be. There's so many times where you're just like, oh, you're working it so hard, and you're like, you know what, screw it. I'm gonna, one more cast, I'll throw a wacky rig in there after you've been working forever, and it hits the water and it's just like swimming away. It's like, oh my God, why was I not throwing that sooner? Unbelievable. That's definitely something that's really effective, if not the most effective possible bait for me. One more bait to kind of throw around, especially in lakes that have a lot of grass where they're staging. Again, we're talking about lakes where it's the ideal scenario where we don't have a cooling trend, we don't have water rising and muddying, anything like that, but a scenario where you have fish that are just in spawning areas and around spawning areas. It's really, really tough to beat this guy right here, the old swim jig. Bass, of course, are their biggest nemesis, it seems like, during this time of year is a panfish. So they're constantly running these baits off, and these are just tasty little morsels. I don't care if they're freaking moving up to spawn or they're actually on bed. Throwing this around those staging areas, absolutely freaking key to getting some more bites. This is the Divine swim jig. It's like the original 6th Sense swim jig. Very, very good bait. It's like just the most like normal rock solid bait. This is my favorite color. It's called Baby Bream. I think it's called Sungill Divine swim bait trailer. This is what I'm going to be throwing, 90% of the time I throw a swim jig in the spawn, pre-spawn, spawn phase. And then this is the new little Conda swim jig. So if a lot of the bluegill are small, they just want a smaller presentation. This comes in a 5/16 ounce size and a 7/16, but this is a smaller 5/16, so it stays up a little bit better. I'll fish it with a flatter, flappy trailer, whether that be a craw bait, a little one like this guy right here. Very, very deadly bait for those fish that are staged up or even on bed in those areas where you can't quite see them. A couple baits when the fish are on bed, you can see them on bed, and you're gonna really work them. I'm not gonna talk a whole lot about this because it's been played out. You can look up all the information you want. And really, to be honest, it's not easy to catch them, but there's no perfect bait for catching them in this scenario. There's a lot of different baits you can catch them on, but bait doesn't matter as much as the way that you're presenting it. So really the biggest thing to me is if you're seeing a fish on a bed, so I'm going down the bank or I'm fishing down and didn't bump my bait or nothing, you see all of a sudden, boom, you see the fish on a bed. The absolute best thing you can do, and it's so hard, this is very difficult, even for someone that's been fishing around a lot, the hardest thing to do is you got to get away from it. And you don't do that by turning your trolling motor and blowing its bed out, because that thing's probably cooked even if it was ready to be a one flipper where you catch them right when the bait hits the water. What you're going to want to do is if you're right here, here's the bed, you're coming up to it, best thing you can possibly do, you see this fish right here and your boat's moving towards it, if you're within 40 feet of it, which you probably are if you can see it, best thing you can do is peel off to the side, make a big turn, and come back around to it really, really slow. And if you can, push pull in, if it's shallow enough, use your poles to kind of ease in, put your poles down, put them up, kind of float in, slow. This is a bed, and you want to catch the fish in the bed. So it's sitting right there, and you want to ease in and get a good idea what that fish is doing. So if this is a fish where if it's 50 feet away and it catches a glimpse of me the second that I see it and it goes, pew, not a fish that's not catchable, but that sumbitch is gonna take a little bit, right? You need to see how long it takes to come back to the bed. The longer it takes to come back to the bed, a general rule, the tougher the fish is gonna be to catch. If you don't spook it, you get a good idea of what it's doing. It's kind of sitting there. It's minding its business. You flip a bait and the thing touches the water 10 feet from its bed and it goes, pew! Again, not ideal, not really what you want to happen. It's gonna be a lot harder to catch that fish. Now, if you get that fish, if you come up to it and you get set up on it and the fish is not leaving the bed and you throw a bait, do not drop the bait on its damn head. Do not throw it on the bed. Throw it past the bed. Do whatever you can to have the quietest splash possible. If that happens, you get your bait, hits the water, doesn't spook the fish, you work it up to the bed and the fish immediately notices the bait, and even if it's backing away slowly and doesn't want that bait, you're probably going to be able to catch that fish eventually. That's a fish that even though it doesn't want to bite, even though it's not liking that presentation, that's one that you're going to probably be able to coerce into biting. Now, at that point, you got to remember that all these fish are completely different. These are not going to act the same way. There's no truth or rules when it comes to bed fishing, because for whatever, just like live scope, when you're casting a fish, they all act a little bit different. So that fish might back off a little bit when you're throwing your Congo craw in there, and then you put this damn white stroker craw on there and he comes unglued and goes and eats it, right? And then the next 27 fish you do that or have the same attitude, you'll throw the stroker craw in and they'll do the same thing. They'll just back away from it. Like, it's always different. But the thing that I like to keep in mind, the mindset that I like to keep in mind is, if I'm having a fish get really hot on a bait, we'll say it gets hot on this Congo craw, and it's like, it bites it the first time, but it just bites the end and I miss it. And then the next time I throw in there, it kind of like, it tries to pick it up again, or it gets really hot, its fins are flaring, it gets excited. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe it'll eat this this lizard, this hog walla. And you flip that bait in there and it's like backs away, it isn't interested at all. And you flip it in there a few times. That's okay. That's a good thing, because I can flip that in there, and then I might flip in, you know, I might flip in this freaking, wherever the hell it went, flip in this clout the next cast, and it's like, not interested, not showing anything. It almost seems like the more presentations, you know, natural presentations, don't freaking drop a bomb on its head, but the more times you can show them something and it's like, the better chance when you come back to that Congo craw, the sumbitch is gonna do it. It just seems like that's the ticket. I don't mix it up a whole lot. I use natural colored baits, and then I use baits that I can see well. Usually I'm using natural colored baits, even if I don't need to, like, we have perspective mode, so I'm able to see some of the fish on that. But white baits, I don't think usually trigger a bite more. They're more for the fishermen than it is for the fish. They will freaking get hot on them sometimes, though. I did catch a fish at, what was it, St. John's River, where it seemed like it really liked that white tube when I flipped it in there. I think I ended up catching on a white Congo. Weird, but some of them are like that. Most of them, I don't think they're like that. Again, I'm not gonna sit here and spend an hour talking about sneaky secret baits and how to get fish fired up on a bed and stuff, because that's a whole nother video. And I think that's a video that's been made by 1,000 different people, 1,000 different ways. When it comes down to it, there's no truth. There's nothing, I can tell you 1,000 different ways, and there might be the 1,001st different ways, the way to make the fish bite that's at your body of water, because they're so much different every single time. So that's my idea of a perfect scenario. Let's talk about imperfect situations. So the most obvious and common imperfect situation is what's about to happen right here on the river, and that is, we have a big warming trend, moon's coming, everything's setting up right for, you know, everything to be perfect in the world of a spawning bass. And then boom, cold front happens. It gets cold, water temperature is definitely going to drop 5 degrees, if not 7 or 8 or 9 degrees overnight when the water gets down, when the temperature gets down in the 30s outside. So we're probably gonna, I literally have no idea what we're gonna see, but if your water temperature is, you know, low 60s and then it drops down to 50 or 54 or 52, you're gonna see a major change in the fish. And let's keep in mind something right here. Just like how those fish that are in that pocket or out on the main lake and they want to move into spawn, just like how they don't need to freaking move 6 miles away to get away from the main lake to go spawn, they can just stop right there in that first pocket or the first protected area. Those fish, when you have this crazy condition, they don't need to freaking go back out to the main lake in 50 feet of water if you have a cold front for even like 3 or 4 nights in a row. They're up there, they're ready to do their thing, and a bass, again, is lazy. It does not need to move hundreds and hundreds of yards to you know, really combat and get used to the changing conditions. But this is where it's important to find areas around the spawn where you have deep water access and you have these different types of staging cover on the way in, whether that be a piece of standing timber, whether that be an isolated patch of grass, or even a big, you know, flat of grass next to an area where they can spawn. Those are the areas that are very, very crucial in order for you to really, you know, take advantage of what happens every year, and that's cold fronts and changing water conditions. And so if I'm on an area, if I've got fish that are in an area and all of a sudden it gets really, really cold, the water temperature drops, some of the best ways that I like to catch fish, and it's gonna change a little bit depending on your body of water, but truthfully, the #1 way to catch fish when it cools down after the spawn or during the spawn phase is with this guy right here, the old jerk bait. I throw a couple variations. If I'm fishing, you know, if I'm got a lake that's got good, you know, 6+ foot access to that shallow spawning area, I'm throwing this guy right here, 97 DD Provoke. Very, very good bait. Always want it to suspend during this time of year. And then if it's shallower, if you got, you know, 6, 7 feet of water or less, I'm gonna be throwing the 106X. A little bit smaller lip, doesn't dive quite as deep. But I learned this the painful way, just like everyone does when they start fishing tournaments or start fishing for bass seriously. where the fish are up there, they're up shallow, they're ready to do their thing. They're eating fun baits, like they're eating that big whale, they're eating buzz baits, they're eating swim jigs, and you're freaking crushing them. So they're eating glide baits, and all of a sudden it gets cold for 2 nights. Big cold front comes in, completely change the mood of the fish, but they will not move that far. Find the very first piece of cover or the very first drop that's hard cover off of that shallower flat where they want to be up and spawn. You will find them there. I can almost guarantee it. And the great thing about a jerkbait is you can fish that vertical hard cover, like a piece of standing timber, a channel swing bank, something like that. You can fish that very effectively. But also these fish are not going to want to eat. They're going to want to be, you know, pretty lethargic. They're going to want to sit around, and this will be one of the times of a year and conditions where they don't want to chase a bait super far. This is a suspending bait, so it stops in their face. So many tournaments have been won. I've won so many local ones, and I've seen so many local tournaments where I got my ass kicked coming up with a jerkbait. When you're like, water was 74 degrees yesterday, and they were freaking on bed and doing their thing, and now it only dropped 5 degrees, but there's a cold front. Like, that's the deal, man. Jerkbait, it's gonna get bit. Doesn't matter if you're at Lake of the Ozarks or you know, Highland Reservoir with 30 foot of visibility, or if you're in Texas and you got 1.5 feet, 2 foot visibility and you're in a standing timber lake, or if you're in the same situation where they're spawning on cypress trees, they're spawning on pad stems, a freaking jerkbait when it gets cold, when it gets tough, is gonna be absolutely killer. Another bait, absolutely key, especially when they're in that period when they're moved out and they decide that they're going to move just a little bit in the spawning area, but maybe they don't have a ton of deep water access. Maybe it's a body of water that just doesn't have, you know, super defined creek channels. Isolated patches of grass that are closest to those areas act a lot like hard cover in those situations where they hold more heat and the fish can be a little bit more comfortable. And of course they can sit there and feed on whatever bait fish are nearby or craws in the area too. Chatterbait, absolutely killer in this situation. You can slow wind it and it's just as that really tight wiggle. Tighter wobbling baits, suspending baits, these are all great cold front baits, baits that just move really, really slow in that situation. Can be absolutely key. So again, pad stems, maybe they'll move from they're deep kind of into a pad field, but then they'll kind of slide out to the outside right where, you know, it's 4, 5, 6 foot deep right on there on the edge. Great place to throw a chatterbait or that jerkbait. If they're up on a standing timber lake where they've moved onto some of the flatter areas, where they've moved up on a flatter point, they're kind of by some stumps, they're by, you know, some sand, some scattered grass, and they're up there ready to spawn, they'll slide right out to where that channel comes and meets it right there. Usually not, again, deeper than 8 or 10 feet, but they'll be right there on that edge and they'll suspend, they'll get right there. Perfect time to throw that jerkbait. Another thing, you know, of course, is gonna be a bait that's very, very important this time of year, especially when it's a cold front, especially when you don't have a lot of cover. This bait, absolutely killer, especially in hard bottom type situations. And I don't just mean the hog walla. I'm talking about this guy right here. I talk about it all the time. Carolina rig, dude. Hog walla, Carolina rig, man. Absolutely freaking critical bait to learn how to throw in this situation. Just anytime you, again, Highland Reservoir, pea gravel, moving, they'll move right from the pea gravel, they'll go right to that first bigger chunker style rock, they'll move to a little man-made, you know, road bed, they'll move to a man-made, someone's marina dock, or a dock that's got a little boat ramp next to it. Killer place to throw the waller right there. Carolina rig, man, ring fry, throw on there, throw the hog walla. Even in areas where, you know, some of those pad stem areas want to fish something really slow, you got a place that's got standing timber, but there's a little road bed that comes out or a jetty, man, that's an absolutely perfect place to throw that bait right there. The last situation that is going to be important to note is rising water and muddying water. Now, during this, if your water comes up and the bass are already, like, you know, not super locked on bed, they're not gonna stay there in that water at that level. And also another important thing to think about is all the fish in a body of water do not spawn at the same time in the same areas all the time. So there's different waves that come in. In the northern strain bass, they'll spawn less, of course. In the south, you know, they might spawn, you know, 6, 7, 8 times a year. There'll be a spawning wave that comes in anyways. But the reason I say that is If that water's coming up, you better go up with it. If the water gets muddy, you better go up too. They're not gonna stay in the same areas where they were back before. I would find areas where you can get, if you find, you know, if you're in a natural lake, find creeks where you can get to the back of them. And what I mean by that is where there's a hard edge of the trees or the bank or whatever it may be. Don't just start fishing areas where, you know, I've seen areas. I fished Table Rock one time when the water came up 20 feet overnight, and we crushed them. They were only in, you know, 5 feet of water, but where they went to was not, you know, the trees, you know, on the outside or anything, or the areas where there was, you know, water 150 yards back into the trees where you couldn't even get your boat, and then the bank was after that. They went to areas where there was isolated trees on the edge right off the bank. There's trees you can actually get to and flip to, and you guys know what I'm talking about when you see it. But basically you want a hard edge. You don't want trees that just go back forever, because that spreads the fish out so much. When the water's coming up, it's gonna make fish go up with it, especially in the springtime, or if it muddies up, they're gonna be feeding a lot of times too, but it can be really hard to locate them. That's my biggest tip, you know, find areas where it's again, some of the first creeks where it comes into a big cove. Go into the crotch of that creek right there, up as high as you can get, and flip the edges of it to where, you know, it may come to a V, and you're flipping the ones up here, not back here in the start where it goes back, you know, 100 yards before it gets to the bank, but back here where it's a steeper, deeper bank. Those steeper drop areas where it's steeper close to the bank and you can actually get to the bank, and there's a couple less targets to flip to. Those are key. Of course, you don't need to mix it up too much there. This Congo craw, this black and blue Congo craw, especially when it's muddy water, or a big black and blue jig, those are about all I'm gonna throw in those situations. A lot of times if you do get a trash mat though, you get something in the back of a creek where you can get to the bank and this water's just come up and it's flooded all these sticks and maybe pollen like we got right now, or there's a bunch of blown in timber. A frog is absolutely deadly in those areas, no matter really what time of the year. But when the water's rising and you get those nice mats, I'm not talking about where there's trees that are this wide that are stacked on top of each other. I'm talking about just debris, you know, pop cans and freaking grass fragments and stuff that's up there that a frog can still depress a little bit and sit on top of. That's really good, along with those the flipping the creature bug there. Well, I got a derb coming up here, so I gotta go figure out a couple things and get to bed here, folks. If you have any questions about spawning fish and fishing around the spawn, please leave a comment down below. Leave a comment anyways, and then if you could, you know, subscribe to the channel if you like this fishing tip, because that tells me that you want to see more videos with tips like this one, where you can learn about fish doing, you know, all different types of things at different times of the year. I'd love to make more of these, but I want to know if you guys want to see them before I do that. So I'm gonna drink a couple beers and get off after some spawning fish tomorrow. I'm out of here. Peace.
I'm not sorry. I can't help this.